Hello Epic 7. We're only a few days away from when many of you will be able to recruit your Moonlight hero from the Headhunting Event. For those of you who have not found your hero of choice yet, don't lose hope. It's nearly impossible to not get the hero you're looking for by the end of the event. A couple of tips I will give you. As you can see, my list is filled with duplicates. If you get these, don't immediately refresh the duplicates. This will cause you to likely run out of currency before the end of the event. Instead, fill in all 30 spaces first. Once that's done, then you can go back and refresh. This way you don't run out of currency and you don't waste a day that could be used pulling a new unit. The second thing is at the 20th day where it says Hero Recruit Available. If I'm not mistaken, you have to headhunt a hero into that slot first, and then the following day you can click the recruit button. So unless they've changed that, if you fill that spot and the recruit button is still shaded out, don't worry, you'll be able to recruit the following day. Now, this will mostly be a recap of my prior guide, but I've tried to make it a little bit cleaner by reducing it to just 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the units that you really can't go wrong picking from this list. As long as you have the gear to build these units, all of them are in their own way at the top of their game. The middle tier is just really strong units that, as long as you have a need or use for them, and of course the gear to build them, they're really strong picks. Some units, like Commander Pavel, will find substantially more use amongst aggressive players such as cleavers. Other units, such as Maid Chloe, will find far more use amongst slower players like Standard and Tank Down. This is a tier you should select from because you're familiar with the unit and know it would improve your game. And the third tier is really a collector's tier. This is a tier that is filled with units that pretty much have better options. They're past their prime and other units are better selected in just about every situation. You only pull from this tier if you just love the unit, or are filling your collection, or are hoping that they get a buff. And that does bring me to one final point. The collection date for this event will extend past the next balance patch. So for those of you who are metagaming and don't immediately need a unit, you may want to consider waiting for the next balance patch notes to drop. That's about 3.5 weeks away. That way you can see if any of these units suddenly goes from trash to treasure. For example, many of us are expecting to see Closer Charles due to his presence on the now removed Awakening Potential system. As with the last video, I'll start with the worst and we'll work our way up to the best. Before we jump right in, let's talk about the units who are not available in the Headhunt. Abyssal Yufine is, in my opinion, bar none, the strongest unit in the game right now. I'm sure you're all getting sick of fighting against her, and I'm sure a lot of units in the future will be targeted at countering her. From the day of her release, she has turned the meta up on its nose. Naval Captain Landy has become one of the strongest units in RTA and has carved out a solid niche for herself in PvE as well, from Guild Wars and Arena to use in general farming and stage clears. Urban Shadow Choux surprised a lot of people. Her tankiness and her ability to spam injury has made her a terror of anybody who relies on HP scaling units such as Lethe, Yulha, and Last Rider Crow. Eternal Wanderer Ludwig surprised me. I didn't expect to see much out of this guy, but if you can build him, and he is not easy to build, but if you can, Cleave is back on the table. Now, as I said before, we're going to start from the bottom and work our way up. These are units you should only select if you're a collector, or hoping that there's going to be a buff, or just really love the unit. Blood Moon Haste is a very difficult to use unit because his kit is just outdated. Though he's relatively easy to gear, he has no place in RTA, and he's only really usable in some Guild War fights where you're fighting against a raise unit like Mercedes, and he can make the team a little bit easier to beat. Judge Kise. She has nothing good going for her. She doesn't have a place in RTA, she doesn't have a place in PvE, she's incredibly difficult to gear, she takes top-end gear to do her job. Her one benefit is her S3 has a skill reset on it, and if you get that off, the team is probably going to win. But her lack of speed, her low stats, her lack of survivability makes her difficult to use at best. Specimen Sez is incredibly easy to gear. He doesn't really need a lot of damage to kill things. If it's stunned, he can one-shot it. The problem is, his built-in stun's AoE, which gets punished. So many units are just immune to stun, so many units have immunity and cleanse on it. He just doesn't find easy play. anywhere in this meta. Silverblade Aramintha is another wonderful, gorgeous unit with a 2019 kit. Her AoE spamming gets punished. Her spamming of debuffs will also get you punished. Immunity and cleansers are really strong, and you'll just have a difficult time using this unit in any part of Epic 7 right now. Top model Luluca, on paper, looks amazing. She's got Extinction, she's got a CR push, she double hits with her S1. She is very hard to gear. Speed DPSs are amongst the hardest units to gear. She doesn't quite have enough speed to go first. She doesn't have quite enough speed to be an opener. She doesn't have quite enough damage to be a nuker like Sid or Remnant Violet. The level of gear it takes to make her work is top end. She just seems to fall a step short in about every metric. Girl really needs a buff. And oh, how the mighty have fallen. The great Arbiter Vildred, once the terror of RTA, the most important unit to have in the game, is now just for clearing adventure and general farming of unrecorded history. He really doesn't have any place in the game other than that. He is the most coveted friend unit because he can really help you clear adventure content. Operator Sigret, you would think with all the barriers out there, this unit would be everywhere. She is hard to pick in RTA because she is a little bit fragile and she is difficult to build with the speed and damage needed. If you've got her on Guiding Light, you can sneak her into a lot of fights, but pound for pound you typically find other better, more used units, but in the right niche she can be amazing. Fallen Cecilia is not actually a niche unit so much as that she is outclassed by several other knights, most of whom are 3 and 4 star. She's relatively easy to gear, but everything that she does, somebody else does better. There are better mitigators. Other knights have built-in Arius or built-in Adamant or built-in Escort or built-in defense buff. All she does is spam barriers, which so many other units do. Little Queen Charlotte should be near the top of the list. She can nuke dark units, and dark units are a problem. But everything she does, Savior Auden does just about as well. And Savior Auden is easier to gear because of her built-in evasion. While Little Queen Charlotte does have built-in mitigation, it pales in comparison to built-in evasion, so most of the Charlotte users have fallen away simply because Auden is kind of the same unit. Ruele of Light was at one point in time one of the top-end Soul Weavers. She is very, very tanky. She's pretty easy to build with really, really high defensive stats, but other units just do it better. She's got one raise, it's single target, and it's on a long cooldown. She's outclassed by her RGB version Destina and several other raise units who bring more utility along with their raise skill. Archdemon Shadow used to be an incredibly difficult unit to fight, but with the way AoE hits are punished now, we're just finding she is harder and harder to use, especially considering the quality of gear it takes to make her viable. While still a solid pick, you won't get as much bang for your buck out of her as other units. Her level of play has gone down quite a bit. Twisted Eidolon Kayron, who at one point in time was considered the worst 5-star unit, got a buff that's made him actually usable. The biggest problem with Kayron is he takes an incredibly high level of gearing to make him functional in this game. Dedicating that quality of gear to a unit who is only good some of the times is not something most people want to do. Now that we've covered the bottom tier, let's jump into the meat and potatoes of the list. This middle tier is units that can be really, really solid if you've got the gear to build them, have a use for them on your team, and if they fit your style of play. Some of these units are more important to certain type of players than others. Some are cleave oriented, some are PvE oriented, some are slow play oriented. So when you're picking from this tier, it should be a unit that you look at and go, this unit I can see improving my play style. First, we're going to talk about Closer Charles. Closer Charles is one of the more underrated units in this game. His special passive allows him to cycle quickly. He does decent damage. He has built-in evasion, which makes him kind of hard to kill. I think people dog on him a lot because of his animation, which is warranted. But as a unit, he is pretty good. And also remember, he was slated for a big boost from the Awaken Potential event that got canned, so a lot of people think he is going to be receiving a buff soon. So if you like Closer Charles, you may want to wait and see if he's got a buff around the corner. Sylvan Sage Vivian. Here's the unit that it seems everybody has built and built well, but nobody picks her. And it's confusing as to why. She does tremendous damage. She gives destruction buff to your whole team. She is a damage healer, which is so rare, a non-Soul Weaver unit that heals your whole team. The things that stop her is she does great damage, but not enough. She mitigates damage, but not enough. She heals, but not enough. And she takes great gear. If you can build her, she is a wonderful pick when you're not sure who else to pick. But she doesn't see the top end of play because other units typically just take her spot. Desert Jewel Basar. He was once the terror of RTA, but since Soul Weavers lost their frenzy buff, he's a little harder to pick. One of his big gimmicks was being able to use barrier inversion to detonate, but now we're seeing so many barriers, so many smaller barriers, that I feel barrier inversion is not as big of a bonus as it used to be, and after he uses his S3 and his barrier inversion, he doesn't really do much for the team. Couple that with a high gear score requirement, and he is a good solid pick, but not quite the S tier he used to be. Requiem Roana is going to be my pick from this event. She's the one unit in this game that I'm missing, and I'm looking forward to picking her up because I like cleaving. She's one of the few cleave style of units that still works relatively well in this game, so if you enjoy cleaving, she's a solid pickup. Be forewarned though, she does have a pretty high gear threshold, not the easiest unit to build. The stats shown on the right are what mine will look like once I have her built and fully kitted out. Astromancer Elena, surprisingly more usable in PvE than PvP. She is a great answer to the toxicity that is Captain Landy right now. She is also a decent pick in RTA as well. The way Flan's artifact synergizes with her kit is just crazy. You don't have this unit, she is a great pickup for Guild Wars, Banner Arena, and some RTA. Architect Lyca is basically Strays 2.0. She is fast and she can nuke a unit of choice. The difference between her and Strays, the Strays can only nuke the highest health unit, whereas Architect Lyca gets to pick, but she has to use a non-attack skill which can punish her. I find drafting Architect Lyca and Strays together as my 4th and 5th pick can a lot of times put my enemy in a very sticky situation. Commander Pavel is difficult to use right now because he is a cleave unit, and cleave is not in a good spot right now. In fact, I think I could go as far as to say cleave is in a very bad spot right now, especially the kind of cleave that Commander Pavel brings. He is easily countered by units like Roana and heavy mitigation units and units that have built-in passives like Green Lilias to stop major damage. He is wonderful in farming unrecorded history, but that's about it. The duality of Strays, the RTA version is fan-freaking-tastic. You can put this unit on a team and they have to deal with it or they lose. Not that hard to build an RTA version of this. The speed requirements can get up there, but the damage is not that hard to hit. But if you want to build the PvE version of it to one-shot hunts, that's an incredibly high level of gear. I do have both Strays built, and you can see the difference between them is pretty hefty. Whichever one you want to build is up to you. He is a very diverse unit, and a good pickup if you can build him. I caution you against picking up a Strays for PvE unless you're sure you can hit the stat points. He doesn't do anything for you if you can't hit the gear requirement. Faithless Lidica. If you've got the gear to build this unit, she's an S tier. She is incredibly difficult to fight against. Her resetting of skills, her spamming of skill nulls, her CR pushing, she can own a team. But if you don't have the gear threshold to make her do these great things, then she is useless. She's not a real unit without real gear. Sage Balin Cezanne's value has dropped quite a bit. He was one of the best anti-cleave options, but as I said, cleave is less and less of a problem right now. He's relatively easy to build. He has 0 PvE usage, but in a situation where you feel like you're going to get crushed by a cleave, you can drop Sage Ball and stop that cleave in its tracks. Maid Chloe. Funny how this girl came back. She was not being played at all, and now she's one of the highest win rate units. Maid Chloe is off and on, hot and cold. She is on right now, she was off 6 months ago, but people keep coming back to the fact that, hey, a unit who can raise your entire team and cleanse all your debuffs and give everybody an attack buff, somehow that's a pretty good unit to have. Spirit Eye Celine, more of a Guild War unit than anything else. She's great at countering Apocalypse Ravi. She is a fun unit to have on defense, and in certain niche situations, she can be a very, very good pick in RTA, but those niches are few and far between. With all of the counter that's out there, it's harder and harder to use her because her big Achilles heel is taking multiple hits, and AoE counter spamming units are everywhere. Dark Corvus, not just for Guild Wars anymore. Built with a little bit of speed and CR pushing artifacts like Durandal, he can be a force on the RTA scene, especially with all of the AoE counterattacks that are coming in. You can build his fighting spirit up very quickly and solo entire teams with him. You've got to be a little bit careful about people picking injury units, so he can't really be a first pick, but he can be a great last pick. Apocalypse Ravi, who was once at the top of the tier. I say she's easy to gear because even a poorly geared APOC can be used. The better geared she is, the better she is, of course, but she is seeing less and less play now that there are more and more counters and more high-end picks to replace her. But she is still a very stable unit that can win you fights. Everybody should have an APOC built, especially for the last few days of RTA season. Do you like gambling? Do you like the thrill of RNG? Then this unit is for you. This unit will win you fights, and when you lose the fights, how can you be mad? You got RNG'd. It's not your fault. It wasn't a skill issue, it was a faith issue. Violet is a fantastic in case of emergency unit. He's a unit that you can throw on the team as a flex pick that your opponent has to decide if he's going to press his luck versus your luck. Violet has won me a lot of fights. People love dogging on Violet because 30% of the time, he doesn't work. And you always remember that 30% more than you remember the 70%. But I'll tell you what, I'll take a 70% win rate in RTA any day. Pirate Captain Flan, wow. I mean, wow. Especially if you run this unit fast, you can devastate the enemy team. Everybody thinks Edward is a counter to her, but she puts so many debuffs out there, she can even overwhelm Edward with debuffs. The only negative is, if she doesn't have the Seaside Iseria artifact at plus 30, she's not a real unit. It's required for her to function. Solitaria of the Snow. You know, if you want to use Death Dealer Ray, you better have a Solitaria. The two go together like Tam and Iseria. Solitaria of the Snow is a control unit all-in-one, even more so than Pirate Flan. On Abyssal Crown, she can control an enemy team, and on Fairy Tale for a Nightmare, she can chip away at even the tankiest evasion teams. An evergreen quality about Solitaria is that she blocks focus. In the past, it's not been that big of a deal because there haven't been that many meta-focus units outside of Seaside Bologna when she was top of her game. But now we have ML Choux, who is a focus unit, and Solitaria stops that problem unit in its tracks. Designer Lilibet is a fantastic counter pick. A moderate to hard level of gearing on this unit depending on how you build her. She self-cleanses, she self-buffs, she self-CR pushes, and she resets skills. Effectively placed, she can win fights for you. She's a unit that when you pick, your opponent has to figure out how to deal with it, and that can help you win fights. And now the part you've all been waiting for, the top tier. No matter who you pick from this tier, it can't be a bad choice. With very few exceptions, those being I just don't play RTA at all ever, all the units in this tier are well-rounded and have solid usages and can fit into multiple different play styles. I strongly endorse taking anybody from this tier. If you've got to choose between one or the other, well, that's a personal decision. I hope the descriptions herein will help you make, but don't let anybody convince you you're wrong picking one over the other. It all depends on your level of play, what you're trying to accomplish, and the units that you have to support them. At the end of the day, no matter which one of these units you pick, you're going to be happy to have it on your account. Ambitious Tywin is one of the best knights in the game. Arguably as good as Last Rider Crow. I think people really underestimate the value of this unit. He stuns, he steals souls, he cleanses just by being on the team, he provokes. Everything about this guy is devastating to your enemy team. He's one of the best Arius knights in the game. Try picking him and just see what happens. And the queen herself, Specter Tenebria. There has never been a meta since her buff back in the day where Specter Tenebria has not been at the top of the list. She could be first picked or last picked in RTA. She is good in Arena. She's good in Guild Wars. She's good in AI. She's good in Labyrinth. She's good in Hall of Trials. She's good in so many aspects of this game that she is considered a must pick up. If you didn't get this unit from your first Moonlight connection, you made a mistake, and now is the time to fix it. Pick up Specter Tenebria and don't look back. Death Dealer Ray went from mid-tier to top tier with a bullet after his buffs. This guy is so toxic, pun intended, that having him on your team almost assures victory unless your opponent takes some serious steps to deal with him. He does require support to help spread his disease, Knockwall and Solitaria being two of my personal favorites. But being able to spam injury and sleep and damage from his toxicity, this is a powerhouse unit. Not the easiest in the world to build, but if you can pull him off, he adds a strength to your team that is very difficult to overcome. Everybody's favorite knight, Last Rider Crow. Who needs horse when you have horsepower? This guy is probably the best knight in the game right now for damage as well as defense. He spams barriers, he gives immunity, he can wear mitigation or defense boosting artifacts, and his damage scales up tremendously. If his motorcycle goes off a third time, the enemy's in shambles. And Bellion. Bellion will always be high up on the charts, simply because she turns off Tagahill's book, which is, I think without argument, the strongest artifact in the game. Any unit who can turn off your ability to soul burn is a useful unit. She can be built on counter or on injury. She is relatively easy to build, with the variety of ways she can be built, and the fact that her mere existence is the major part of her kit. Martial Artist Ken. He got a buff that threw him to the top of the tier list. He needs effect resistance, he needs damage, he needs health, he needs defense, he needs basically everything but effectiveness and crit chance. But if you can pull it off, if you can gear this unit and gear him well, he will win you fights. Just put him on the team, and if the enemy doesn't ban him or draft a couple of answers, he will solo win the fight. Briar Witch Iseria. Just by existing, nobody can raise units, and that includes your own team. Everybody basically has Extinction built into their kit while she is on the field. On top of that, she doesn't die. If you get her to 0 health, she procs Immortality, just like Kayron. On top of that, she hits through evasion, she has a pop at the end of her attack, she does tremendous damage, it's AoE, she is a little bit of everything in a DPS unit. She is assists cleave as well as counter cleave. I think this is a unit that if you don't have, you want to pick up. She is one of the most important units in RTA right now, and she is great in Guild Wars and even some banner arena fights. My personal favorite, Lionheart Sirmia. After her buff, she went from great to really great. Lionheart Sirmia can be built on Lifesteal or on Destruction if you're running the Golden Rose artifact for healing. She is not super difficult to build, again because she doesn't steal gear from lots of people. Being a defense scaler, it's not that hard to find the gear to put on her. Zeo does what nobody else can do. Zeo lets you take a easy to gear unit with relatively low speed and still go first. At this speed, I can outspeed most 315 to 320 speed Rands. If you want to take the first turn and stop the opener, Zeo is it. He can be used in cleave, he can be used to counter cleave, he can be used to initiate units like Jacko, Yufine, and Roana. Fantastic pickup, usable from Guild Wars to RTA to Arena. Lone Crescent Bologna. Now here is a unit with all the anti-crit that's out there between Choux and Landy and even DN. Bologna sees right through that and never doesn't crit. Along with the passive AoE attacks and an incredibly powerful nuke, as well as scaling up damage and the ability to wear Sigrid's Scythe to stay healthy, this unit can be built on counter, on lifesteal, on destruction set, even speed set. She's incredibly diverse in her ability to build. She is hard to build in the sense that she takes gear that most people don't keep, right? Who keeps tons of attack and crit damage gear that doesn't have crit chance on it? She is difficult to build because you probably don't have the gear for her laying around. You'll have to start crafting and looking for it. Mediator Kawerik, commonly called Hand Guy. He is hands down the best cleanser in the game, and then some. He provides AoE attack buff, AoE immunity, AoE cleanse. He has a full strip on his S2 along with an attack break. He CR pushes your highest attack unit every time he uses an S1. He can be built for support, with bulk, he can be built with damage, he can be built fast, he can be built slow. He is a veritable renaissance man of utility, an all-in-one unit. Other than Conqueror Lilias, I can't think of anyone I would recommend more than Mediator Kawerik. Conqueror Lilias, one of the best RTA aggro units in the game. Even with all of the new counters, and yes, I'm looking at you, Moon Bunny, she still sees high level of successful play in RTA. She has also become a staple of PvE, from arena defense and offense to guild wars to ancient inheritance to use in Hall of Trials. One of the things that intimidates people about Lilias is they think she takes insane speed gear, and I'm not gonna lie, I love my 307 speed C Lilias, but I'm gonna tell you what, I built a 180 speed C Lilias with 2k defense and 20k HP, and I put her on Proof of Valor, and I drive people nuts with that build. She doesn't need insane speed. You can build her fast, you can build her slow and tanky. It's easy to find a place for this unit. She works at 240 speed almost as well as she works at 270 and 280 speed, just depending on your level of play. Don't be intimidated by other people's Godspeed C Liliases. This is a unit that stands head and shoulders above the rest. If you do not have C Lilias, now is the time. Once again, these are my opinions based on my experiences and how I play the game. Always get multiple opinions. Watch other people's tier lists. Go into it with an open mind. If you just love a unit, who cares what I say? Get the unit that you love. It's important that you have fun playing the game. If playing with Judge Kise is going to make your game better, make you have more fun, then she's your obvious pick, no matter what I say about her. It's a game. If you're not having fun, why are we doing this? Anyway, I know this was a quick breeze over. There was a lot to cover, and I did it as quickly as possible. If you want some more in-depth information or some deeper discussion about the units, check the link in my description of the video for my Discord. Jump in there as a group of wonderful, helpful people that will be happy to discuss units at length with you, and you can also directly DM me if you have questions. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great one, everybody.